Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second to the last episode of Inside the Criminal Mind. This is obviously pre recorded, and yeah, it's only because I have other responsibilities to do in my normal day and time. So we're knocking this out of the way now. Anyways, this is episode 11, and this is going over the episode named And in the End. This is going to be season 15, episode 10. I'll be honest, this was the first time I saw this episode. I have not caught up like to current with it like in chronological order. But I was aware of the last season being season 15. And this is the season finale to season 15. And it actually kind of features some well-known people that we actually have seen in some reviews that I've done before. So, let's get into this and see what we uncover about season 15 or the season finale to season 15. So I'm trying something a little different. Oh no, we're not doing that. There we go. Okay, so here is an introduction. Here's an introduction. Here we're going to do an overview as always, just because there might be someone new who is watching. And let me pull up my notes because this is a little confusing. Okay, as always, I'll start with an introduction. As someone new may be dropping in or seeing this episode first, then I'll do a synopsis of the episode to establish that everyone is familiar with what I'm reviewing. Then I will cover the criminology and victimology relevant to the characters in this episode. However, I won't be covering too much victimology in this episode, and you'll see why. Then I will go over how this behavior could have been prevented, and then, of course, a conclusion, which I'll be honest hasn't changed that much because the same conclusion pretty much still applies. But we'll still go over it anyways. So, as always, I'm Sharissa. You might know me on Instagram, you might know me on Twitter. If you know me, you know me. And welcome. If you don't know me, I hope to see you more. My mental health journey is something that inspired me to really dive deep into the world of psychology. To be honest, my passion for psychology and all things related to it started whenever I was a young teenager. And everyone thought that I was crazy because I wanted to study psychology. I got talked out of it as a young adult. And then I talked myself back into it after realizing the path that I decided that I wanted to do with my life, at least career-wise and professional-wise. So that led me to my mission, which has been about destigmatizing and normalizing mental health conversations, psychological applications, and psychological discussions just all together, because having a better understanding for psychology has seriously taught me how to be a better person and how to live a healthier lifestyle. And I think that everyone should be able to have that type of education and that type of influence in their life, and to really achieve that individual decision or that individual moment of clarity in their life. Everyone deserves that. Anyways, so why did I decide to do this series? Well, because criminal behavior can be related to societal issues, and examples of behavior and multiple perspectives are very present in this series, as we've seen all throughout these different episodes that I've done. We can tell that there's so many different ways that somebody can end up in the predicament that they're in, whether that be from a criminal perspective or from a victim perspective. Criminals can, sometimes they might have experienced like a traumatic childhood, and that traumatic childhood, like they never received help for it. So they went off to do pretty heinous things. But then there's other instances where a person could have grown up having a completely normal life, but then something happens and everything changes. So it's really interesting to just have those different perspectives because it could happen to anybody and you never know. You never know what can happen exactly. So that's one of the crazy things about psychology. Anyways, so let's move on to the synopsis. Trigger warning. There's not really too much other than that there's mention of medical emergencies. So this is another continuation episode regarding Everett Lynch, which is a serial killer. Everett is assumed dead from the explosion that concluded the previous episode. So Spencer returns home, but then he passes out from an intracranial hemorrhage. And we literally find that out like not that long after we notice that he's like dying slowly. But as he slips into his comatose state, he's visited by ghosts of the past, namely supervising Special Agent Strauss, George Foyet, and Maeve. So let's take a little trip back. Some people might not know supervising Special Agent Strauss was, one of the really amazing characters. Might not have liked her at first. Turns out she's actually not that bad. George Foyet, which is a really crazy one. Like, wow, how would he pop up into Spencer's like dying purgatory state? That's the main killer that kills Hodge's wife, and I believe, if I remember correctly. So really crazy. That's happened, that he had showed up in Spencer's dream, or the purgatory state. And then to top it off, we're revisited by Maeve, which was the girl from the season 8 episode 12 episode named Zugzwang. So, and that's the one that Michelle Trachtenberg was a part of. So like that was really interesting, and that kind of, it made me really emotional, I'll admit, just because you finally get to see Spencer. He gets to reconnect with her because he was so torn up about the fact that she died too, and for him to be finally get that moment of like clarity and like forgiveness and like basically like her permission for him to continue living his life, basically, because he felt terrible that she died. And that she was the last one that he spoke with before he woke up, I believe. So, anyways, back to the actual episode, because I'm jumping ahead. Each of these people provided important insight into Spencer deciding to live or die. Spencer is found by JJ and Penelope and taken to the hospital after figuring out that Everett Lynch is not dead after all. At the hospital, Spencer's mother is brought to the hospital, and Penelope also stays with them for those interactions as well, because if we all remember, by this point, we're all very, very well aware that Spencer's mother suffers from dementia, I believe. And so she has a lot of trouble taking care of herself and really making sense. So eventually, Spencer wakes up, and while Spencer's situation is all playing out, there's a whole bunch of other things that are also happening. So I just thought it was interesting to talk about Spencer's whole experience, because that happens a lot, especially in psychological like scenarios and like certain situations, especially near-death experiences. And I know we're kind of traversing outside the lines of like psychological research and such, but it kind of makes you think about shows like the OA whenever you're thinking about near-death experiences, and how whenever they happen, you normally have these weird kind of like extraordinary experiences that can't be explained by science. Like obviously it's probably like a really wild dream, but it feels like more than that whenever you're in it. And then along those lines, you start traversing into the territory of lucid dreaming, or being stuck in a purgatory state, or certain instances like that. So it's still an interesting motivating factor for Spencer, because I believe that Spencer decides to do something more aligned with teaching by the end of this episode, but we might touch base on that by the end. So while Spencer's situation is playing out, Everett is playing out his game by taking out the security detail that Rossi had placed on his wife. Everett instead presents himself as the security detail in order to get close to Crystal, which is Rossi's wife. He soon takes her hostage as the team catches on, and they end up at the airport hangar with the team's private jet. Rossi switches planes with Crystal or places with Crystal and gets on the plane to Mexico with Everett. Rossi, knowing the ins and outs of the plane, gets himself out of the handcuffs, grabs a gun, and manages to escape the plane after a few gunshots are exchanged. However, as he falls out of the plane, the team shoots the fuel tank of the plane, and JJ ignites the trail, causing the plane to explode as it begins taking off. So this was an action-packed episode, to be honest. You go from being like really emotional, like, oh my goodness, is Spencer gonna die? To, okay, who's gonna die? And then you realize who dies. But so it was an action-packed episode that really pulled together some important moments, and it ended with Penelope deciding to leave and do nonprofit work. So we're all kind of led up on this adventure, this emotional adventure, to believe that Agent Rossi, is actually going to be retiring, because you see him and his wife talking about it at one point in the episode, and she's like, I better hurry up and help you get this done, because before it's too late and you won't retire. And then it just so happens that all this other stuff ends up happening. And yeah, so you kind of start thinking that, yeah, well, you're seeing this party scene at the end of the episode, because there's like a good maybe 10 minutes left at the end of the episode, and you're seeing it seems like, is there more? So yeah, there's a whole party scene at the end. And you're like, oh, Rossi's retiring, but then it's not. Then we realize that it's actually Penelope's going away party, because she's officially leaving. And yeah, so it's actually one of those kind of bittersweet things. But you also kind of catch up with everyone, because apparently it's like a month after the whole incident happens. And yeah. So let's move on to the next slide. So let's look into the criminology. Like I said, there's not going to be any victimology today. However, there might be some victim prevention, but we'll see. See here. Yeah, no victimology today, because this episode didn't really feature a victim, but we will touch base on it. Everett Lynch targeted the mom types. He made that clear in this episode when he came face to face with Rossi's wife, Crystal. According to the fandom, he specifically would live out memories that he had with his mother during his childhood with his victims. His mother used to, apparently, do the same thing. So he would alter his appearance, his mannerisms, and small characteristics to carry out the deception on his victims. Apparently, like I say, he learned these behaviors from his mom. So that he would use his daughter's death to gain sympathy, which is basically emotional manipulation whenever you're thinking about it, which is one of those really key things that doesn't really bode well. It should be a red flag. But the crazy thing is that he uses his daughter's death to gain sympathy. However, he doesn't mention the fact that apparently it was his mother that killed his daughter. And he tries to use it as his daughter died from injuries from the drowning, resulting from the drowning. But here's the other kicker, is that he would also cut the faces off of his victims. So he's a known narcissist and misogynist, and it's apparent that he has a specific hatred for women. And this type of behavior is indicative of maldevelopment during formative stages. So it's very obvious that the experiences that he had whenever he was a child with his mother very well, like undeniably, affected the way that he handles his relationships, his interpersonal communications, and really just the fact that he has so much rage for women. I mean, he goes through these relationships with these women, and essentially until they propose to him, or vice versa, and then that's whenever he would strike. He would strike during their happiest moment, and this has to do with basically exactly what his mother would do. And so there's some connections that can very well be discussed there. Now, I did say that we were going to touch base on some victimology. Like I said, I wouldn't really consider Spencer too much of a victim, just because his hemorrhage was caused by an explosion that was kind of indirectly caused by, or was actually directly caused by, Everett. So I mean, it wasn't planned anyways. But if I would have to say that there was a victim of this episode, it would have to be Crystal, which is Rossi's wife. She was technically a victim. She escapes pretty much any harm, and she was basically targeted because she was Rossi's wife. So she was one of the team's spouses, and she had the mom vibe, which Everett distinctly, or very, explicitly said in the episode. He told her to her face that she has a mom vibe. And instantly, red flag. Anyways, so let's go to some criminal victim prevention. So not too much victim prevention, other than the fact that really the other security guard should have been on a better watch for the bad guy. Whenever, he didn't, apparently the other guy didn't check in with Crystal when he got there. So it made it that much easier for Everett to take him out. And that just didn't seem right. Well, I don't know. Sorry. Okay. So what could have happened? What could have changed with Everett? Well, Everett could have benefited from a proper atmosphere to nurture his emotional development. And maybe not even just his emotional development, maybe even his cognitive development, maybe even his social development. These are very distinct needs that need to be met, especially during the formative years, especially during childhood, and especially during adolescence. He was so severely influenced by his mother's actions, so much so that he carried on recreating these different scenarios. So if he would have had the proper intervention during his childhood and in his adolescence, then this possibly could have been prevented. Or if there was proper If there was proper intervention during his childhood, before things started getting really bad and before things became too much of a habit in front of him, then that was probably a better chance of the behavior being prevented. But the longer that he's exposed to the troubling behavior, then the longer and harder and more difficult that it's going to be to break those bad habits, especially as an adult. So that's pretty much all I have on that. So basically, as a conclusion, as always, childhood trauma is a major major theme that I've noticed, and I mean, not even just whenever it comes to this show, but just in real life, there's a lot of people who seem to struggle with things that they experienced in their pasts, and that's completely understandable, but that's not an excuse to just create mass upheaval in a way. There's therapy, and there's different types of therapy, and there's people who can help. And there's a lot of ways that you can get ahead of what happened to you by learning how to process the emotions and by getting the right support, because support is just like so important. But yeah. Another, like I said, support. Having a support group is important in these situations to collectively seek closure. And I know I've pretty much had that on like every episode, but it's true. Like I said, whenever there's therapy and whenever you get the right support, then you can end up learning the necessary tools for your toolkit to help you handle even future issues that might arise, or future stressors, or just any type of stressful situation. So yeah, I know it's kind of a short episode. This is probably going to go down in history, at least in Eradication Wellness history, as the shortest episode. But I'm a little out of breath, and I'll be honest, I'm quite exhausted. It's been a very busy day for me. But rest assured, everything's going to be put together, and the energy is going to be restored for the last episode next Thursday. So make sure that you tune in live next Thursday for the last episode of Inside the Criminal Mind, and then maybe an announcement as to what the next series will be. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you all have an amazing night or day or weekend or week or whatever, wherever you're at. Bye.